perfect.
All right, cool. So, Jim, you are my friend. You are a coach. You're an entrepreneur. You've got the best memory of anyone I've ever known. Thank you so much for coming today.
Jedi, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure being here with you.
I'm so happy to have you, and I'm really excited too because I think a lot of people, think of entrepreneurship as having a product-based company, right? Or maybe like having an agency. And a lot of people don't always talk about the many successful entrepreneurs like yourself who have their own coaching, company, right?
Right.
So, can you tell us a little bit about what is it like to be a coach as an entrepreneur?
Being a coach is one of those terms that's grossly overused, and it varies anywhere between someone like me who has been a coach for over 2 decades with a targeted market to somebody who was fired last week from their HR job and announced that they were a coach. There are virtually no barriers to entry in that field. What I found is that entrepreneurs relate to other entrepreneurs. Only somebody else who gets it. I live an entrepreneur life and have been doing it for decades. I would be the world's worst employee at this point for another company.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs like yourself do it because you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You have to be in this for yourself. That's your psyche. That's what motivates you. And why I love coaching entrepreneurs is that we both get one another. And for that reason, when we work together, we get incredible results.
So, lots, there's B2C, there's B2B, and it sounds like you're really running an E2E operation, right?
Yeah, I like E2E. I'm going to steal that one. Thank you,
Yeah, no problem. So having a coaching business, right? Like, how do you scale this type of business?
I don't.
Okay.
This is a boutique business.
Okay.
This is a little bit like saying, and it's a very difficult question that most people run up against in my field. And the analogy I have is, let's say you had an artisanal bakery with incredible trained bakers, and you had your own special recipes, and everything was fresh, and you had to come there at a certain time to get the incredible baked goods. That's what's special about it. And then somebody comes up to that bakery and said, we have to scale this. Well, what does that mean? We come up with standardized formulas, we start opening other outlets, then it becomes a production issue, and all of a sudden you've lost what made that bakery special.
Yeah.
And then you go even further and the stuff winds up in a supermarket in the frozen food section, and it has nothing to do with it. So I looked at it as a lifestyle choice as well as a professional choice, is that this is what drives me, being able to work one-on-one with people. And it's not going to scale to 7 figures, and that's cool.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool take on it. I actually never thought about it in that regard, right? So you love what you're doing, and you can't reproduce you. If you reproduce you, you no longer are unique, and your advice is no longer unique, and what you offer is no longer unique, right?
And if you reproduced me, I think the world would have some major problems.
I could agree with that, but it'd be a cool place still. But
yes,
it would be interesting. Mm-hmm. So how did you start this? Like, what made you start? What you said, 2 decades, so 20 years ago.
Okay, what made me start is for 35 years I have sold things.
Okay.
And I've sold services. I sold china to college women back in the 80s. I sold auto restoration equipment. I sold toilet cleaning chemicals. And I once sold natural herbal-based lubricants to fundamentalist Christian women. And I'll add that I did not look for that. That one found me.
All right. So which of those made the best sales? That's what I gotta ask.
The lube.
The lube, yeah.
And I'll tell you why, and this is an interesting business point. If you have an affinity with a specific market where you have created a level of trust, okay, you can sell almost anything.
Yeah,
and at the time, there was limited media. This was well before the internet. So you could get to people via print, you could get to them via broadcast, which was television and cable, which was fairly limited. You could get to them through radio, which was burgeoning at that point with Christian stations. And that was about it.
Yeah.
And direct mail. And the organization that I was working with had targeted this audience. There were 40 million people who identify as fundamentalist Christians, which means approximately 20 million of them are appropriate for the product. 12 million when you went down further were of the correct age where the product was appropriate.
Okay.
And the people who were selling this product were co-religionists. So in other words, they were other believers and they talked sincerely about their product. And as a result, people trusted them and people would buy. The results, Jedi, were amazing. You know, in direct mail, sometimes you're lucky if you get 1 or 2% response. If it's a highly qualified list of existing buyers, it might be 10 or 20%. They were in the 90s.
Wow.
And this is a product similar to cosmetics where the product costs pennies and with the packaging it costs lots of dollars.
Yeah.
And
so how do you establish that trust? Like if you're recommending advice to like an entrepreneur like me or somebody else in the audience, how do you get that trust? Like how do they get that trust?
it's an affinity with a group of people or a market.
Okay.
And you can't fake your affinity with it.
So how do you build that group, like that community, right?
Well, you're talking about it, and I'm going to give an example of what you're doing very effectively. Mm-hmm. You're building an entrepreneur's lifestyle organization, you know, in your meetings and your Junto meetups and so forth. So it's entrepreneurs who are talking to other entrepreneurs, and everybody in the room gets one another. And there is such a sense when you are spending time with people who are part of your tribe. It's a relief, it's energizing, it's exciting.
Yeah.
And somebody who is not an entrepreneur is never going to get that.
Yeah, that's the truth.
And what I found in all the years that I was selling product and so forth, and I was involved in marketing in a variety of capacities. In the late 1990s, I was selling marketing services. In those days, long-form television. I was selling print. I was selling some early web stuff. And I noticed that companies were buying marketing services that were masking over obvious underlying problems within their companies. In other words, they might have a poor salesman, so instead of improving the salesman or replacing him, they bought marketing materials. Or they thought that they needed to drive sales with a website, but they really weren't attuned to how that would work.
Okay.
And I woke up one day and said, I don't want to make closet litter anymore. I want to work with the person who has to go out in the world and eat what they kill, who has to create their own sales. That's my tribe.
Yeah.
So I pushed all the marketing aside, and since 2000, I've strictly coached entrepreneurs.
No, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and to your point about like being able to relate to each other, you know, like it is tough being an entrepreneur, right? You know, a lot of people don't understand, you know, the amount of decisions that go into it, you know, the responsibility that's part of it. And I know like some of my favorite conversations with yourself, with other people in my peers group, is just letting loose and being like, hey, I feel weak right now. Like I feel like I don't know what to do, right? And I need some advice. You know, I need like a guiding hand, and that might not be in business, in like an actual, like, you know, tangible business decision, but just to talk it out. You know, is such an important thing. So, you know, is that what you find a lot of people that you coach, like, you know, kind of go to you for, or is it more like specifics?
They go to me for what you talked about.
Yeah.
Because as entrepreneurs, when we face the world, we put our suit of armor on. I am
Yeah.
strong. I know what I'm doing. I'm here to fix something or help you or improve something. But we're still people underneath that with our own vulnerabilities, with our own fears, with our own, you know, specific passions or drives.
Yeah.
And only somebody who knows you can have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I work with many incredibly successful salesmen, people who are making well into 7 figures. And we can have a conversation that they would never be able to have in many cases with somebody who is not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, because they don't see the experiences, you know, you can't really relate. Yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, how do you, you know, you as a business, if somebody else wanted to, you know, open up their own, you know, coaching studio, coaching shop, like how would you describe that? Coaching business, I guess, right?
Right.
If somebody else wanted to do what you're doing and was looking up to you, you know, how do you advise them to get started as a coach?
Do it.
Okay.
Do it. In other words, it's a little bit like there's no school for prostitutes.
Yeah.
You do it, and then you're in this profession. In my case, if you want to be a coach, just do it. Work the street, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the analogy is not that far off. In other words, it's a reflection of who you are, what you want to do, and do you relate to other people in a way that they want to share an experience.
Yeah.
And what I find is that what makes you a great entrepreneur is you just did stuff. And people who say they're entrepreneurial are like people who say they're virginal. Either you is or you isn't. And in your case, the difference of being is you wake up in the morning and you make this happen, and you get stuff done, and you're willing to live with incredible risk. Where we've shared before that you've been really on the precipice a few times in your career.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And an entrepreneur can deal with that. A person who is a W-2 salary person would probably have a seizure over that.
Yeah. You know, and it's funny because I have a bunch of friends, and one of my best friends I used to work with for years, right, was always, looks up to like the entrepreneur community and always has wanted to go out and do it on her own, but has always asked me for advice, like, how do I get started? You know, I'm not sure. You know, Jedi, like, do you think it's a safe decision? And I was like, no, it's not a safe decision. But that's the point. You just gotta do it. Like, you really do. And I hear that advice from the most successful people I talk to. It's just do it, right? You know, it's like, who cares what's going to happen? You know, you just gotta try, and then you'll find it out. You know? Well,
we had a conversation a while ago where we were talking about you and your plans and budgeting and so forth. And one of the things that I've mentioned is take 20% out of this lump sum of money and just spend it on new venture development. Because that's what an entrepreneur does. And an entrepreneur cannot stand the status quo. There's always something new to try, always something different. What I also found in coaching is that there are a million different flavors and a million different personalities. And somebody who would relate to one personality might not relate to another. For instance, some of the analogies I made a few minutes ago might so offend people that they would never even want to talk about it, and how dare you, and it's awful, and you're a threat to our profession. And then there are a lot of people who think it's great and they get it. Those are called my clients. And it doesn't, all you need is the number of clients that are going to make you successful and happy. And if the rest of the world doesn't get us, that's okay. If the vast majority of the world never uses your products or services and never sees your video, cool.
I literally just wrote a blog post about maintaining client relationships and creating a client checklist, because there is a such thing as a bad client. And it's not that they're a bad person, right? But it's more that relationship isn't going to work, right? Our relationship works well. We get along, we can communicate, right? But perhaps me and another person, right, equally good person, we just can't communicate well together. So that relationship as like a client, and business owner is never going to work. So communication is the most important thing.
And the other thing too is you don't know till you do it. Okay, sometimes you'll get a vibe. I've had occasions, every time we have a relationship, sometimes you get a dud. And I've had 2 occasions in the last 18 years where I slid the check back across the desk and said, it's not you, it's just that we don't mesh that well.
So tell me about this. Like, how do you quantify whether or not you're going to mesh with the person? Do you have your own client checklist?
I have my own client checklist, and this is what it is. It's somebody who's driven, somebody who has to come up with new ideas and is constantly pushing, somebody who has more ideas than they have infrastructure, somebody who, frankly, a lot of people can't play well with because they don't get them. Usually it's very hard for many entrepreneurs to have effective relationships with their staff or other people. They get along great with clients, and they just want somebody who gets them. And when somebody gets them, they can have the level of conversations and the depth of things where they can resolve long-standing concerns, problems, desires, and that's where you get real breakthroughs.
And so how did you build up your network? So you find entrepreneurs, who are just doing it, they meet your checklist, right? But you had to start with one at some point, right? And now you have many more than that. So, was it all referral based? Was it, you go out and find these clients? Like, how do you personally?
The answer is yes.
Yes, okay.
The answer is yes. There are both ways. Many times it's referrals. Many times it's somebody I happen to meet. There's one person that I happened to meet on the street once, and eventually we began talking together. I will have 150 conversations in a year. Conversation can be like this. Conversation could be with somebody that I met at a conference. Conversation is an introduction or a referral. Out of those 150, between 7 and 10 will precipitate out into clients. I have my own formula, just as any other entrepreneur. Average engagement is about 3 years, but it's on annual renewal basis. So in other words, it's somebody who came back for 3 years. Some are 1, some I have a couple have been with me over a decade.
Yeah, that's cool. And getting into just a little bit of logistics, when you create your annual engagement, how do you quantify what you're doing as a coach? Right?
There's
expectations.
Okay, expectations. There is an engagement letter that specifies everything, but the engagement letter is a recapitulation of what we have talked about in previous conversations.
Okay.
I'll typically I have a minimum of 2 conversations with somebody before we have an engagement. Sometimes it might be 3 or 4. It depends when they're ready. And as you know, with people and personalities, occasionally somebody will click immediately, but very often you want to go a little bit deeper to make sure that it's truly the right fit.
Yeah, that's true. So, and when you sign the engagement letter, I assume that your clients have expectations themselves, right? Like you have expectations for them that they have to meet throughout the year. Like, what do those expectations look like?
Number 1 is they have to be honest.
Okay.
Number 2 is they have to, with my assistance, define exactly what ails them, what they're looking for, and together we figure out, are these the right points? Maybe there are other things that need to be brought to the fore. Are there long-standing issues that they need to discuss that they have buried? Are there immediate problems? Maybe in many cases there are immediate opportunities. I call it change on the dresser, meaning if you clean off your dresser after 2 years, you might find $35 in change. And mentally, if we clean off the dresser of somebody in their business, there may be immediate hits of business opportunities that they never saw. In one case, it was $50,000 of stuff that was just stuck in neutral. And from that point, I meet a minimum of monthly with my clients, and there's homework at every meeting. And the homework is stuff that they should be doing as a business owner. If they do the work appropriately and they do it on time, they make progress. My clients are free to call me as many times as they want. Call meaning text, email, telephone, as many times as they want between meetings, and I commit to coming back to them within at least 1 business day, sometimes sooner. More communication means more progress.
So what skills do you think you personally have that make you a good coach, that you think other people who want to be a coach themselves should also, have?
3, experience, empathy, and blunt honesty.
Experience, I think, is self-explanatory. Let's talk about empathy and blunt honesty.
Okay, empathy. I'm like you. I eat what I kill. If I don't bring in sales, I don't pay mortgage, I don't buy groceries. Okay, I get it. That's the level of empathy. Empathy means we share an experience as opposed to feel for somebody who has a different experience. And I'm the person across the table, in many cases, the one person in their life who gets that. And blunt honesty is, I'll be in a client's face when I think they're full of it. I'll be in a client's face as appropriate to say, you need to do this, or this is not happening, or you're on a path that's going to be self-destructive.
Have you ever had a client respond poorly to that?
Oh yeah, all the time.
How do you handle that?
I don't care.
I like that.
I really don't care, because when a client...
That's blunt honesty, right?
Yeah. When a client responds that way, usually they're about to have a significant breakthrough. And I'll give you an example. Usually I have a trajectory. Initially we do very well together. There's change on the dresser. We start laying out issues. We meet monthly. It's going fine. And then sometimes with clients it'll taper off because longer term change is difficult. So with many clients, around 9 or 10 months into the engagement, I call it a come to Moses moment, which is, this is an ongoing thing you have avoided. Very often I will go right into their face saying, you are doing your customers a disservice or your staff a disservice by doing this. Is this who you want to be?
Gotcha.
In one case I did that with a client. He was furious. He yelled at me. I'm incompetent. I didn't floss, all the other things like that. And, I don't think I should work with you anymore. And I said, well, maybe you shouldn't. And then I got a call the following day, and he said, I went home and I told my wife, and my wife said, well, Jim is right. And I thought about it, and I said, okay, you're right, now we're ready to do something. I've been with that client now over a decade. But I'm an entrepreneur. I take risks. Sometimes my risk is with the relationship for the betterment of what has to happen.
Yeah.
And somebody who is afraid of challenging somebody because they're afraid that they'll lose the gig, they shouldn't be in this profession.
Yeah. And did you ever give advice that you regretted afterwards?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And how did you like help the client, back from that, or how did you realize that you regretted it, and then what did you do after?
First of all, if I regret it, I apologize immediately, which is a rare quality these days because people feel that they have to have reasons. I'll apologize. When I've made a mistake like that, it usually comes from two things. Number one is I did not have or I did not seek sufficient information for the decision, that there were more decision points that I did not know or I didn't probe enough for. And number two is experience is a two-edged sword. Experience gives you a wealth of examples that you can draw upon so that somebody can prosper or avoid a mistake. Experience can be very dangerous because it will give you an example that may not be appropriate today. It might be something that was appropriate for the way people reacted or thought in business in 1994, but is not appropriate to 2 generations later.
Yeah.
So in many cases, as we age, we become prisoners of our experience, and it's a constant challenge for me to say, when is it appropriate and when do I have to shift? And that's part of my growth as a coach.
So, all right, so last question, I know we're running out of time here, is how do you recommend others break out of that experience shell? Like, do you constantly question yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Force yourself into different experiences, and I'll give you an example. You and I and several other people are in a regular lunch group of entrepreneurs who are under age 30. I am not. But I started that group for a reason, and that is I want to start surrounding myself with people who are not my peers, because that's the only way I'll stretch myself. We tend to norm to our peer group,
Yes.
and one day you find yourself with a bunch of people with gray hair complaining about the state of the world and figuring out when they can retire.
Yes. Okay.
And I don't want to be there. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So this is amazing, and I think everyone's going to find a lot of value out of this. I mean, your experiences alone are phenomenal, and not only your experiences, but also the fact that your memory is so crazy good. This guy remembers literally everything, that you accurately remember your experiences, which I think is one of the biggest things I personally have found value from. So I always promise everyone our famous 30-second shameless plug at the end of the interview. So for anyone out there who's looking for a coach, right? What services do you provide, or what would you recommend? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, they can get a hold of me by calling Jim Shulman, and my telephone number, if you're older, is 610-896-7047. Or you can email me if you're a little younger at jims@Elsinore.com. ELSINOREBA.com. You can try me through Twitter, but frankly, I'll work on that one.
Yeah.
You would be ideal person to talk with me if you fit the definition of an entrepreneur. Somebody who is driven. They can only be an entrepreneur because of their personality. They are very successful. They have more opportunities than they have ability to execute them. They have a staff and they're frustrated with working with the staff because of who they are versus somebody who's an employee. And they also have questions about where they want to be in life with their occupation, with their business versus other things, avocations. I understand there is no separation. Your personal life and your business life are intricately interwoven if you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
If you're that person and you have a sense of humor and you'd like to be challenged and you want to accomplish incredible things and you like a nice person like me, we'd be great together.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming today. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope everyone found a lot of value. I know I do every time I talk to you. It's absolutely amazing. Please tune in for the next Startup Junto interview. We have a ton of them, all the time. So you'll find equally awesome advice from Jim and other founders. And finally, my friend, I hope you have a safe drive home. Yeah.
And I thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure always. All right, thanks.